Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, October 16th, 2024, and on the show today, we are going to talk about farm names. We're going to talk about when to harvest what and the quarterbacks of farming, which will make sense presently, I think. So let's do it. Okay, so I want to start off with a quick clarification for yesterday's show. I got this comment from @JudyWood4530 in reference to what I talked about with PFAS in compost, and it says, quote, or you can get PFAS into your crops because your well is contaminated with that. Let's just say they said stuff here. Contaminated with that stuff from industrial waste from a leather tanning / shoe production corporation that dumped their waste over 2 townships. In some areas, no more well permits are being granted. They continue, quote, why am I so sore about this? Because there's PFAS in my well, and now I have a county-supplied filter on my drinking water that I will need in perpetuity. Please do not make light of this issue. End quote. That is such a bummer, and my heart breaks to hearing stories like this. To be clear, I was strictly talking yesterday about the likelihood of PFAS getting into compost and how that was decreasing, not about PFAS from industrial waste making its way into water supplies or how contaminated sludge was spread on farmland in places like Maine or other tragic stories like that. Apologies if that was not clear. Although compost is not as likely a source as it once was, PFAS itself is still an issue, and I was definitely not trying to make light of it or situations like those. And I'm sorry if my comments came off as flippant. Like I said, these forever chemicals deserve their whole show, not just because they're ubiquitous, but because they have indeed upended the lives of farmers and their communities. Very sorry for your situation, Judy, and perhaps more on PFAS another time, because obviously there's a lot there. All right, changing gears. Yesterday, when I did the Patreon shoutouts at the end, I mentioned one great farm name, shout out to Jakers Acres. And I said I would tell the story of our farm name today. So that no one can ever say that I'm not true to my word on Tuesdays, here is that story for your Wednesday. I have told this story elsewhere, but when Hannah and I were first getting ready to start a farm, we were still working as interns on the farm where we met, Bug Tussle Farm. Throughout our season, we would joke about what we would eventually name our farm. Now, I'm a writer and have been for a long time, and my wife Hannah is an artist and way better at that than I am at writing. She studied painting in college and spent a year studying in Florence, and I had no such similar education with writing. I lived in New York City and read a lot of books and fancied myself a writer and kept a daily journal and wrote short stories that were not very good. So yeah, that's not really comparable. So yeah, also at that time during the internship, I had an obsession with draft animals. I really wanted to learn how to farm with draft animals. And so that was the plan. We would get a farm eventually, get draft animals to help us work the land. We were also more interested in running a homestead than a farm business. So we kind of thought farmstead made more sense than farm as a name. So somewhat jokingly, we came up with Rough Draft Farmstead as our farm name, a nod to our artist sides with the term rough draft there, and a nod to our desire to incorporate the idea of farming and homesteading together. And it was just the whole thing kind of grew on us. We also liked the idea of putting draft in the name as a way to encourage us to keep working towards draft animals. Of course, we adopted the name, and in fact, the name became even more apt as we found ourselves over the next 12 years on like 5 different properties. So lots of rough drafts in our life. Obviously, the draft animal part never came to fruition because, well, not only have we dramatically decreased our need for soil work, but we never really owned enough land or even had access to the amount of land required to have draft animals. We feel pretty confident we are in the final draft here at our current farm, but if we learned anything over the years, it's that putting all of that pressure on yourself to find a permanent place can actually make everything more difficult, especially when you have to move and mourn all those feelings and ambitions of permanence, any trees or whatever you established, any work you did on the soil. That said, I am basically refusing to physically move our farm again. We're going to talk about the art of moving farms next week and how to do it without killing yourself, but I am for real never doing that again if I don't have to. Not starting a single family farm at least. I'm getting too old for that. And if we ever move again, the rough draft will go into the trash and I will manage someone else's farm or manage a small garden instead. Or we would start a farm with other people. I wish when we were starting out that we had realized that was even an option to start some sort of farm collaboration rather than taking all the risk and difficulty of starting a farm on our own. Starting a farm requires an indescribable amount of work, and not to mention a lot of money. I had not at the time heard of farm collaborations, co-ops, or anything like that. And honestly, we had a sort of myopic view where we just wanted to have our own land and have our own thing, start a family farm, which I now I don't regret it, but it's definitely, I would have done it differently. I think both of us agree on that. Why our younger selves get to make so many decisions for our older selves seems tragically unfair. In that way, youth isn't the only thing wasted on the young. What we couldn't see and that no one really explained to us is that a farm is just another business, although arguably way more complicated and risky than most. And it needs to be treated like any other business, and that venturing out on your own is just profoundly challenging. Starting a farm is not like starting a bookstore where you buy something and resell it. And it's not like starting a popsicle stand or a food truck where you buy in produce or fruit or whatever, modify it slightly, and then resell them for a profit. Starting a farm is more like starting kind of like a small factory where you not only have to manufacture the widgets that other people use, in our case, vegetables, but you also have to serve as the head of human resources and public relations. You have to be the marketing team and the distributor, the retailer, the producer, the machinist, the accountant, all of it. Yes, that is the story of many small businesses, but most small businesses do not have to also manufacture the widgets that they sell or modify practically from scratch, while the earth throws whatever it wants to at you in the process. Market gardening can be considered a small business, but starting a small farm is not starting a small business. It's starting an enormously complicated and huge business shoved into a small shell. So anyway, the story of our farm name is both the story of one small farm and the story of how, if we had another draft, we'd probably do it a little differently. We'd collaborate, so even if we did have to move, we wouldn't have to do it alone. I'd be curious to hear some of your farm names and kind of any interesting stories behind those. I love those. I also loved all the comments yesterday about how people keep lists. It seems paper lists are still quite popular, which is, I don't know, reassuring in some weird way. Shout out to paper notebooks. But a lot of folks either use a hybrid system or just full-on technology as well. I mean, it's hard to argue with having a small computer in your pocket that can keep track not just of your daily list, but your planting schedule, your accounting, your calendar, and literally anything else. I did learn a new word in the comments from at Johann FW7D, Eint Listingsfreude, which apparently, if I'm saying it right, means the satisfaction achieved by crossing things off a list. I have no idea if Germans actually use this word or if it's actually real, though the internet seems to think so, but I like to pretend they do. Also, the commenter's name is Johann, so I feel that lends some credence. Anyway, in the next segment, let's talk about a bunch of stuff. Let's also later discuss how bad of a pun that is. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimmelgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a Rimmel tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. If you, the listener, want to support our work, you can do so at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere, but I will always get to those Patreon questions. Hopefully this show saves you at least $2 or $5 a month on farming, or provides $2 to $5 a month worth of entertainment. And if not yet, maybe today's question will do the trick. Today's question comes from Patreon member Taylor Jameson, who asks, "Hey Jesse," hi Taylor, "wondering if there are particular crops which you bunch out of the field, i.e. for ease on your body or to get the field heat off quicker, thinking particularly in the middle of the summer." Okay, so first, great questions. Here's my harvest management strategy in terms of what I harvest when. Mixed lettuce and head lettuce, along with any baby greens, are the first to come out of the field early in the morning before the heat sets in. Tender stuff just wilts and decomposes quickly, gotta get it out. Then the harvest moves over to radishes, beets, and turnips, essentially any bunching item that has a tender green on it. After that, I go to large bunching greens like chards and kale. There's an argument for switching the bunching greens and root crops, but radish greens wilt pretty easy, or at least easier than kale, so I would at least get radishes before moving on to bunching greens. Next in line will be the carrots, though I should say it's good to have something with you to provide some shade to help protect the carrots as you harvest, because although the greens aren't as tender as radishes, They are still tender and can wilt and look crappy. As the saying goes, wilted greens wilts your market table. I don't know if anyone actually says that. May not actually be a phrase, but you get the idea. A harvest cart with an umbrella or an extra bin solely to provide shade to keep the harvested bunches out of the sun while you work is important. Then I move on to green onions, which are not as tender and are among the last items I harvest besides tomatoes and peppers and squash and that sort of stuff. Sometimes in the spring, we will also do bunches of green garlic or garlic scapes, and those can be last in the harvest line. Okay, so back to your questions. In terms of ease of body, this is going to be different for every individual to some extent, but it is good to vary your body positions. I harvest a lot from my knees because that is the most comfortable for me. I know a lot of others find squatting to be comfortable as well. I will actually go back and forth, but I always just encourage you to avoid bending at the back as much as you can. Instead, bend at your knees and then bend your hips in order to save your back. It actually took me way too long to learn that. You can even try it right now as you listen to this. Simply start by bending your knees and then bend over. The pressure relief on your back is immense. The impulse when you're bending over to do something is to just bend at the waist first because it's faster, but that puts a lot of tension on your lower back. So again, start with the knees, then bend at the hips. As for what to bunch in the field, bunch everything you can. If it's getting really late and stuff is hot, you can just, turbo harvest and make your bunches in the shade or something. But something I took from Ben Hartman that I think is super helpful was to add as much value to your product as you can every time you touch it. So I like to just go ahead and get things bunched. Also, untangling things in the shed and bunching them there is very slow and time consuming. I prefer to wrap about 35 rubber bands on each wrist before I go out to harvest. We use the non-latex number 33 bands and get 70 bunches of whatever I need before refilling the bands on my wrists. That way I can keep track of the numbers. I know that I got 70 and not have my hand fall off from the pressure of having so many rubber bands on it. Also, as you slip the bands on, make sure to spread them out on your wrist. If you pile them on top of each other, they will become hard to organize and will cut off more blood flow than is probably safe. There's a technique to bunching that will save you a lot of time, but is not super easy to describe. But all you really need to know is the main point is always go around the greens and not around the carrots or beets or root or whatever it is. In other words, it's easier to get around all the greens than it is to get around all the carrots. Also, don't overwrap them. 2 times around is typically enough to hold the bunch together. And then that way, if you have to remove a damaged carrot or damaged carrot greens or whatever in the washing process, it's not too hard to get it off of the bunch because it's not tightly wrapped. Last, I always harvest a bunch of loose carrots or whatever it is that I'm trying to harvest. I put those in the bin with the bunched carrots, and that way, if I have a damaged carrot while we're washing, we can just go ahead and replace it from the loose carrots or loose radishes or whatever it is. Anyway, I think that's a good summary. Pun not intended there. After harvest, get them into a shady area or store them in the cooler and sealed bins until you can wash them. Greens will notably sop the moisture from beet and carrot roots, making them flimsy and tasteless. So harvest no more than 2 days before market if you want to keep the greens on. If it's going to be more than 2 days, remove the greens from the roots as you harvest. Radishes are less of an issue with this, but you don't want bland, flimsy carrots going to market. All right, up next, let's talk about putting our aces in their places. Be right back. Hey y'all, Farmer Jesse here. I just wanted to let you know that we have posted a bunch of discount codes over at our Patreon page at patreon.com/no-till-growers for our patrons over there. So if you love and appreciate our work and you could use a little break on the cost of seeds this year or on your irrigation supplies or boots or whatever, we have several discount codes available over at our Patreon page. Like I said, patreon.com/no-till-growers. So, just to be clear, that means for as little as $2 a month, you can save hundreds of dollars on your farming stuff this year. That's real. That page is so valuable to our work, and at a certain level, we'll even shout you out at the end of this show. Because you rock. That's it. Thanks, y'all. Enjoy the show. So on Wednesdays, I may use this day every week to make my coaching analogies and discuss where farming does, and sometimes doesn't, cross over with coaching sports. One of the crossovers I've been thinking about lately is the idea of positions in sports and how that relates to farming. I know not all of you are sports fans, so I will try to make this as broadly applicable as possible. So it's clear what I'm talking about when I'm talking about positions. A position in sports is like the quarterback on a football team, or the goalie in hockey or in soccer, or the pitcher in baseball. These are positions the player plays. So every time they go in the field, that's where they go. Every player on the field has a position they play. In some of these sports, the position is somewhat interchangeable, but for the most part, the person who plays the position specializes in the role of their position. When kids are young in youth sports, they generally play most of the positions and learn most of the positions before they start to specialize. Sometimes their body type or athleticism leads them to one position or another, but most people try basically everything as they go through the youth sports program. Then, assuming they stay in that sport, after their careers start to wind down, they may move to an assistant coaching or assistant manager position before moving to the head coach position. And at that point, they kind of know all the positions. So the question I had this week is, are there positions on a farm, and should there be? This is completely hypothetical and potentially ridiculous, but would there be a value in developing or naming specific positions on the small diversified farm so that each employee or farm member not only can see exactly what is expected of them, but could also really specialize in it before moving on and trying another position if they wanted to? More like the youth sports model, perhaps. Obviously, this would apply only to farms who have at least a few members or employees, but each position would be tasked with getting really knowledgeable and skilled at their position. Hear me out. The harvesters, for instance, would be a position. They would evaluate what needs to be harvested and when, as described in the last segment, but also coordinate with the coach, the farm manager, about forecasting. That is to say, what is coming up and how much. The wash packers serve as the receivers, and this position helps to communicate different needs and concerns to the harvesters and coach or coaches, and as well as the sellers. This is kind of what would be considered the pivot, the central pivot in soccer, the person that kind of stands in the middle and redistributes the ball. And then also, obviously, they have to wash and pack the produce. The sellers are the marketing team. They are the faces of the operation who are at the farmers markets or CSA drops or doing the deliveries. They are relaying what they learn from the customers to the manager. The manager, of course, or the head coach, is the one who orchestrates and coordinates everything. They do the planning for the day. They do the training, the motivational speeches, build the work culture, all the coach stuff. Then maybe there's a team of planters, or maybe everyone is a planter for non-harvest days. What I like about this change in perspective is that maybe it encourages each player to really take pride in their position and get skilled in it. In the same way that a striker in soccer studies other strikers and works with striker coaches, etc., a harvester could study harvesting techniques and other farms and get really good at that skill. Or a wash packer could study washing and packing and storage so that they could get really good and knowledgeable in that area. So it's not falling all the way back on the coach or farm manager or farm owner. Now, the difference would have to be that, unlike professional sports, the workers could change positions over time, which is how they would learn the farm enough to manage their own farm one day if they wanted to, but also just to stay interested. Now, not everybody on a farm may care about that. They may like just specializing in what they do and sticking with it. But to me, anything that builds that sense of propriety while also building that sense of pride in what we do has potential to not only make for a fun work balance, but an exciting one, and one that people can really take pride in. Oftentimes we have everyone just doing whatever needs to be done on a farm, and to a certain extent that is fine too. Of course, I also recognize that some farms do have quote unquote positions, but do they employ them with the same intentionality that a team employs and empowers their players to play a position? Maybe, but it's worth thinking about it that way. Anyway, maybe there's a nugget of an idea there, or maybe not. Maybe this is just one of those times I stretch my analogies way too far and can expect to be berated in the comments. I'll let you be the judge, but I think I will wrap it up there for now. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe and share. Sharing really helps grow this show, and it also lets us know if you are enjoying it, which is helpful. Shout out to Willie Breeding for the theme music and to the team at No Till Growers. Join us at patreon.com/no-till growers as well, where not only is there a list of great farming discounts, scroll down Patreon members in the post over there and you'll find it, but at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or if you just join us in the month of October, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to, there were a lot of new ones yesterday, which was very cool. It seems like you all like lists. Who knew? Shout outs today to Green Acre Flower Farm, Andrew, Carl Hostetler, got it, I'm not sure if this is just VDubDav3, yep, Elizabeth Wingfeld and Carolyn Carlin. That's a cool name. It's got like that little bit of tongue twisterness to it, almost like, but like in a good way. Like it's like adding a little bit of a spice to like a chocolate dish. It's like just enough. Good stuff. Thanks you all. Love seeing so many people signing up for the Patreon page. It's amazing. All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.